Today's topic is the Keystone Pipeline and Enbridge Line 3. They're currently again rearing their ugly heads, and I have Sacha Louis Norel with me here. He's on the ground with Line 3, and we're going to discuss the current fight over it. Hi.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, Sasha. All right.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your involvement and when it started and so forth.
Absolutely, yeah. So I've been involved in environmental activism for about 2 years now, and fighting pipelines for about a year and a half. I currently go to college in Minnesota, and have been involved in Minnesota 350 on the pipeline resistance team, as well as the Sunrise movement. And we have mainly targeted the Line 3 expansion project here in Minnesota, which we will talk about more in this segment.
Great. So let's dive in. I wanted to give our viewers a little bit of overview of the history of this battle and what it means and so forth. So let's talk about the tar sand oils. So what are tar sand oils? Basically, we have an area in Canada near Alberta where there is a soil that is basically rich in oils, and it contains a compound called bitumen, and that is what this crude oil is basically extracted from. And there's large-scale mines in Alberta, as you can see in the picture there, and those look also quite striking from the air. So bitumen is basically this muddy substance that's very viscous. It has basically each grain of sand is covered by a layer of water, and then on top of it a layer of very viscous oil. And that is what these companies are attempting to sell. So what are the negative impacts of this? This is the side base of the side product of this extraction creates something called petroleum coke, and you could see a picture of it on the bottom, and it creates massive ponds of toxic waste. It also creates destructive flattening of the and deforestation of the ancient forest, the boreal forests in Canada, and it depletes as they use water. They deplete the water, fresh water, and they pollute it. They also endanger the livelihood of the and the health of the First Nation Indigenous tribes in Canada, in Alberta. In terms of the transport, the negative issues are that a spill contains it can contaminate groundwater and rivers. It also can affect wildlife and vegetation and cost billions of dollars to taxpayers when there's a spill. Basically, there's still ongoing lawsuits trying to recoup some of the costs of cleanup from spills from these companies. They're very easy to come and do a project, but then it's very hard to get restitution from them. There's also an impact, a social impact. There's studies have been done where it was shown that there's sex trafficking and human trafficking to the sites where they call them man camps, where workers constructing those pipelines are present, and that has, of course, impact on the local population. Also, it imports hundreds of workers to a normally secluded area, and that's an issue that was raised recently because of the COVID situation, and it's obviously it could increase spread of COVID within the areas where the pipeline would be constructed. Do you have also we have construction negative impact is that construction would generate greenhouse gases equivalent of building 50 new coal-fired power plants, resulting in a social cost of 120 billion over 30 years. And finally, construction would cause deforestation. So do you have anything to add to that list, Sasha?
Yeah, I would add that when it comes to the drug trafficking and sex trafficking, we have already seen that happen with numerous pipelines, and it particularly impacts indigenous communities. There's a current campaign here in Minnesota and across the Midwest called MMIR, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives. And it was created because when these pipelines are constructed and when these man camps are made, the human trafficking for Indigenous people, and especially Indigenous women and children, just skyrockets. And it is a huge issue that we've seen time and time again with pipelines. And I would also like reiterate that the climate impacts of pipelines such as Line3 are enormous. We know that we have to drastically cut carbon emissions if we're going to have any sort of a livable future, and yet we are still out here building new pipeline projects that would have immense carbon emissions, and those are going to disproportionately impact the next generation, the upcoming generations, and future generations. And climate change itself impacts communities of color, indigenous communities, lower income communities. All of these are really big long-term impacts that often aren't even brought into the conversation of pipelines.
Yep, and basically, it's a very serious problem altogether, and have basically, in addition to that, an issue of the legal aspect of all of this, and that is that the passing of the pipeline is in direct violation of the Ojibwe tribe treaty from the 1900s. Is that correct?
Yeah. So these treaties were made so that the Ojibwe people could still use this land for like hunting and fishing and anything that they need for sustenance. And yet these pipelines are a direct threat to those rights to use the land, especially with Line3. One of the big issues is oil spills that will affect the wild rice, and wild rice is a huge cultural importance to these indigenous communities, and it's also just sustenance for them. And these pipelines always spill. There are always going to be oil spills with them, and so the oil spills are going to be impacting the wetlands that the wild rice grows in, and just these indigenous communities' ability to survive off the land.
Yeah, and you'll see in a little bit in a video what that wild rice collection looks like. But ultimately, the issue with this is that it is hard to justify it in terms of the price of oil itself, and the reason is that a tar sand oil production costs about $82 per barrel, while they can sell it on the market right now for $47 a barrel. So there's a $35 loss on every barrel that they generate and sell, and that doesn't make any economic sense in that regard. The only explanation is that they're trying to pose it as something that has a potential future growth. And the problem is that if we intend to grow oil consumption and crude oil creation, that's detrimental to our environment, as we know. So instead of winding it down to ramp it up is just basically a terrible environmental idea. What complicates this issue, though, is that it's not just oil that's being created by these tar sands, and part of it is something called there's this bitumen is used also to create besides oil. It's creating these asphalt products that we use on roads, and roofing materials. Primarily in terms of the roads, it's an issue because they're expecting growth in the Asian market, in India and other parts of Asia. They're expecting more and more roads to be built, and so that the use of bitumen is going to go up in the upcoming years, not down, and that is a problem because it creates additional boosting of that what makes it beneficial to extract those oils and produce those products. So meanwhile, there's been work on alternatives. The alternatives do not replace the use of bitumen completely, but they are mixed together with it, and they can quite significantly reduce the use of that material. And here you can see what that looks like. It's basically extract from wood bark, and it has qualities that are similar to bitumen and can be used for road construction. And it's been shown that in some situations it's even better than bitumen in terms of cold weather resistance and so forth. So unfortunately, the industry is fighting this, and so far no major industrial entity has embraced the use of these materials. So we would have to probably use that as part of the war on tar sands. So do you have anything to add on this?
I would just add that, when it comes to these kinds of products, it really is important that we uplift, sustainable alternatives. Like you said, like these aren't just an issue when it comes to fuel sources. It's also being used in a lot of other products. Fossil fuels are like a fundamental aspect of so many different products that we desperately need to find alternatives to all of those if we're going to have any sort of a livable future.
And it's important to note also that some of this, because of the current prices, some of the production and transport of these products are calling for subsidies. So we all pay for this to be economical, which is a huge problem. So let's talk a little bit about the history of the pipeline. And so this is the Keystone XL pipeline. As you could see, there's legs of this pipeline that have already been constructed. It's mainly crossing the United States from north to south. The remaining part that is proposed that they still have not replaced is this green line, where that would not only replace the old pipeline but expand the throughput, and that is what is currently being fought against. So in terms of the history of it, it started in 2008 by Canada. They've been working on segments of this pipeline. They have used loopholes in the to usurp the more rigorous vetting process that is usually includes public input by getting a permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineering, and got a permit from them. So that section was built, and only after that was built, there was outcry and serious. Basically, government has agreed to look at these things and conducted a much more significant study. And Obama refused to provide permits for the northern branch of this pipeline. Finally, towards the end of his presidency, after a lot of protest, but as soon as Trump came into office, the thing was reversed. Unfortunately for the industry and Trump, the Supreme Court conditioned this reversal by a far more significant study. What do you have to add something about that?
Yeah, I would add that when it comes to Keystone XL, like you said, the Trump administration has really tried to push this pipeline through. They obviously have very little concern for climate change and really want to push for a lot of fossil projects. And the decision by the Supreme Court was, it wasn't perfect in that there is still a big chance that this pipeline will be constructed, but the fact that they are making it so that there will be a stricter environmental impact statement, and just regulatory process is a step in the right direction. Absolutely, there's still going to be lots to fight, lots to the fight for this pipeline, as the company is hoping to start construction on that remaining segment sometime in the next year or two. But there is also a lot of momentum against the fossil fuel industry right now, and I think that will hopefully play out well in our favor over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and just to remind everybody, the industry is not sitting idle either. They're spending monies, they're lobbying. In 2014, they spent on midterm campaigns about $270 million, and immediately as the new Congress convened, they did pass a bill to increase the speed of the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline. So these things have an effect, very real effect. Of course, be very aware of that, as I think most progressives are. But there it is. This is the Enbridge Line3, and this line is basically supposedly a replacement line. The proposed one is a replacement line. However, it's much larger capacity, and the old line is riddled with holes and cracks and so forth, and spilled multiple times. The argument that commercial entities make is that environmentalists are not really concerned with the environment, because if they were, they would want to replace this cracked line. But the truth of it is that it's not at all the case. When they're talking about the replacement, they're also talking about abandonment of the existing line, which doesn't at all really encompass disassembling or cleaning that line, and the liability in that regard is very unclear, and there's really nothing in the books in all these states where the old pipeline crosses that is decided as to how they would be dealing with this company in order to make sure that the abandoned line is not completely disassembled. Here's a little bit of a really good video that Winona LaDuke was featured in, explaining this whole thing. She's been fighting for indigenous rights for the last few years, and here she is.
What is Line 3? A lot of people want to know, and a lot of people don't know. So think of it this way. There are 6 really old pipelines that they put through in northern Minnesota, shipping diluted tar sands from Alberta to Superior, Wisconsin. And one of those lines is called Line 3. It has, according to Enbridge, about 900 structural anomalies in it. Structural anomalies are things like small little pinhole leaks, maybe come some cracks, and some of those end up to be big problems, like that Kalamazoo spill. That was a structural anomaly. Line 3, it's old and it's corroding and it's at the end of its life. It's already had a number of leaks and spills, and frankly, it's a catastrophe waiting to happen. There is a likelihood that there is a whole bunch of contamination under the present line. And once that corrodes, our children and grandchildren may one day watch it drain a lake or a wetland or flood a farm field. Fixing these problems is very expensive, so Enbridge wants to abandon the pipeline, walk away, and build a brand new one in a brand new corridor. Enbridge calls this a replacement project. They're replacing Line 3. They are not replacing Line 3. They are putting in a whole new corridor and doubling the size of the line. That is not a replacement. That's a brand new line, and that's what's wrong. So we've got 2 problems. First, we've got a problem of the proposed new Sandpiper and Line 3 corridor through the heart of our best lakes and wild rice watersheds and through our treaty territories. We also have the problem of this old crumbling line that Enbridge wants to abandon. And right now, what abandonment means is that they just leave it and walk away. And the company says that they will take care of it, but it is not clear that there is any liability from the Enbridge Corporation. The worst part is that neither the United States government or the state of Minnesota has any plan to deal with it. The good news is that the Ojibwe tribes are standing up, and a lot of landowners, county commissioners, and mayors are getting increasingly concerned about who's going to be liable for Enbridge's mess. So tell Governor Dayton to tell the state legislator to tell county commissioners that abandonment is not what we want. We want big Canadian energy corporations to clean up their mess and not leave it for all of us. And we feel that they should put hard-working Minnesotans to work doing it. It's time to make a plan, investing in cleaning up and stabilizing our existing infrastructure and building stuff that actually serves people. Miigwech, this is Winona Leduc.
All right, so it makes a lot of sense. Build stuff that's good for people, not bad for people. That's very basic, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much potential for building things that will actually reinforce our communities, especially locally, and yet our government, our national government and local government are bowing down to a foreign corporation that wants to dilute our waters and put our climate in even more peril.
Right. Again, this is not against infrastructure. This is pro-infrastructure in the right places and against infrastructure and things that just simply don't make sense, not economically, not environmentally, not socially, in any possible way except for making some people rich. When you look at this stuff, even like up in Canada, like there are individuals that are making or trying to make enormous profits, although most investors have already withdrawn from it because it's economically not viable. Trudeau owns a portion of Power Pipeline, so it's just not feasible for them to continue this line. Yet they're pushing for it. So let's look at the aspect of the history of that Line 3. So the line itself is pretty old. It's from 68. And it suffered many leaks. One of the leaks that they were talking about was in Grand Rapids, and it spilled 1.7 million gallons at the time. And it's still, like, it cost them billions of dollars to clean it up over many years. This spill caused the company to reduce their capacity in the existing old line, and that is exactly why they're trying to build a new line that will restore the capacity of that line to 800,000 barrels a day. So this is not just a matter of the endangerment in North Dakota and Wisconsin and Minnesota, but the fact that it increases the production or the demand for production at the Alberta site. So basically, they would finally have a purpose in extracting even more oil. And again, tar sands is the most dirty oil right now. The problem with that also in terms of why is spill such an issue, and the issue is that these tar sand based oils are acidic. They're much more corrosive, and they spill, according to a study, 3 times more than other crude oil, normally produced crude oil. So it's not just the equivalent; it's worse. And in 2018, Minnesota Public Utilities Commission solicited an input from the public, and 94% of the 70,000 comments opposed to the construction. So they still approved the construction. So what is the purpose of allowing public dissent or questioning if you're going to rubber stamp it one way or another? What would you like to add to this?
Yeah, I would talk more about that public input aspect of it. I think it's really important to highlight the fact that the Public Utilities Commission unanimously approved the permit for Line 3, despite 68,000 Minnesotans speaking out against it. And even when the permits were appealed and held up in the Court of Appeals, because Enbridge didn't show what would happen if the pipeline were to spill, like how it would affect the watershed with the Northern Lakes, then the Public Utilities Commission still approved it with 4-1 vote. So despite all of the incredible public support against this pipeline, the public outcry, they are still bowing down to foreign corporations, and that is probably because the Enbridge Energy has spent millions of dollars lobbying the Public Utilities Commission. So it's just showing that they are going with money over people in an issue that is affecting us personally, affecting our environment, affecting our futures. So it's really disheartening to see that our public agencies are not working for the people at all.
Yeah, that's very sad. In August of 2020, though, Governor Tim Walz appealed for the certificate, so he did attempt to stop it, and that was based on the Department of Commerce claiming that there was no real need for the expansion, and that was an economic argument rather than a more environmental or social or tribal trampling of rights argument. But nevertheless, that was an opposition. In November of 2020, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineering approved the last remaining permit and stated that the project was compliant with all federal laws and regulations, which doesn't mean much. But and then a 401 water crossing permit recently was granted in Minnesota by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency after a long fight. So what was that about?
So the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, or the MPCA, is one of the major permitting agencies here in Minnesota for projects like Line 3, and they had to issue the 401 water crossing permits that would basically allow Enbridge and Line 3 to drill under the Mississippi River and drill across under other rivers and through watersheds and all of that. And so we've been fighting for them to deny the permits for over a year now. And they had a lot of public comments earlier in the year. there was a bit of outrage there because they only had some online comments and didn't really push things back, despite the fact that there was a pandemic affecting every aspect of our lives. They held a contested case hearing, which ended up being very incredibly narrow when it comes to Line 3. It only looked at a very niche aspect of the pipeline. And even though we had expert witnesses, trying to fight for this one little aspect that the MPCA allowed for, the judge still ended up ruling in favor of Line 3 because of how narrow the parameters were for the contested case hearing. And so at the end of the day, we tried to lobby the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, but without the actual money, just like public pressure, we put a lot of public pressure on Governor Walz, since he directly oversees the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And we just, put a bunch of public pressure out there, including a lot of comments and testimonies, and protests as well. But despite all of this, the MPCA still issued the water permit with Governor Walz saying that he agreed with their decision. And at the same time as this, and as a result of it, 12 out of the 17 members of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's Environmental Justice Advisory Committee quit out of protest because they were basically not let into any of the decision, because Line 3 is a very clear destruction of environmental justice. And so it's clear that the MPCA and Governor Walz still want to push the pipeline through despite the environmental issues, the environmental justice issues, despite the fact that there are ongoing legal appeals, despite the fact that there's a pandemic and the pipeline will be bringing in thousands of workers from out of state into these communities that are already being hit really hard by COVID. It was really disheartening to see, but there are also a lot of ongoing legal battles and on-ground battles and resistance happening all over.
Yeah. Let me take you back to Standing Rock, and that is a time when there was a real opposition on the ground. Many people showing up and protesting the pipeline at the time, and that is considered by a lot as a real watershed moment in terms of the Native American resistance and so forth. There was real abuse of power there, and there's a documentary that I recommend to watch. Let's take a look at the little section.
After the dog attacks, camp filled up. We're talking thousands, droves of people begin to show up. The security team, they had identified an area that they could defend. It was a bridge, whereby they held that bridge and kind of stopped our forward repelling of this threat. No! Those security forces begin to mace unarmed people and inflict that pain and brutality. People were laying on the ground crying because they were being maced or pepper sprayed.
The police are protecting and serving the pipeline. They're protecting fossil fuel profits over human beings. They're macing people. They're fucking tasing them in the face.
Nobody who's been brutalized during that time was ever made whole. I was there when peaceful water protectors were attacked and brutalized on Backwater Bridge. Flashbangs. This is my first experience with this sort of weaponry. And it was like the 4th of July. There was all sorts of flares, all sorts of less lethal bullets. The things that they're using on protesters today, Black Lives Matter protesters, but it's more than just Black Lives Matter. Obviously, there is a revolution happening right now, but it began at Standing Rock. I was there and I saw blood running from people's eyes. I saw blood running from people's limbs, where these security forces, these private mercenaries, were maiming people.
If anyone man enough, get the fuck over here. I'll be waiting here.
In 20-degree weather, the National Guard, they had a fire hose, and they were spraying all of the water protectors and coating them in water in freezing temperatures. It is an endangerment to human lives, and they knew this. I was there on December 4th to see 3,000 veterans, maybe 10,000, 13,000 people, just a long line of cars going into Oceti because people had been given this great news, and victories were hard to come by at Oceti. But this day we had learned that President Obama and the Army Corps of Engineers were going to deny Big Oil's permit to drill under our river. So we wanted something to celebrate, but I was also very aware that 3 weeks prior, Donald J. Trump was elected president, and he had invested at least $100,000 in the Energy Transfer Partners pipeline. Kelsey Warren had also donated to Donald Trump for America, or whatever his campaign is called. So I knew that if it wasn't a complete ruse, that it was at least an empty-handed promise from the United States government once again.
I can definitely see how that can be seen that way. And so tell me a little bit about what's the current situation, what is being done.
For Line 3 or for the Dakota pipeline?
In general, but Line 3 in particular.
Absolutely. So as I said before, like the final permits were approved for Line 3, and construction has been going for a couple weeks now. There's been a lot of on-the-ground protests. Just a few days ago, 20 water protectors were arrested doing nonviolent direct action protests, and were held in jail overnight despite the current pandemic. So there's been a lot of actions going on there. A lot of people preparing to go up north if need be, to northern Minnesota. Obviously, this is made more complicated due to the coronavirus pandemic and not wanting to endanger Indigenous communities that are already being struck really hard by the pandemic as well. But there is a huge need for resistance on the ground, resistance all over the country. So on the one hand, you have a lot of nonviolent direct action, and then you also have actions being taken against the fossil fuel financiers, such as Chase Bank, which is one of the largest funders of fossil fuel projects in the world. There have been numerous sites there, such as the coalition Stop the Money Pipeline, which has been working on targeting fossil fuel financiers for a long time now, and has been having a campaign against Chase Bank for some time as well. So just last week, we had a national call and a national day of actions against Chase Bank for funding projects such as Line 3. There's also a lot of work going on in places like the Twin Cities in Minnesota to raise awareness around the issue of Line 3, and all around the country to raise awareness of this issue. This Line 3 is sometimes called the pipeline that no one has ever heard of because, this like as opposed to Keystone XL or DAPL, Dakota Access Pipeline, it just doesn't have nearly as much national press coverage, despite the fact that it is arguably as impactful when it comes to treaty territory and barrel CA and all of that. And so just raising awareness in cities and places all across the country, as well as trying to create a political shift. President-elect Joe Biden has already committed to, at least he said that he will revoke the federal permits for Keystone XL, which is hopeful, and there are a lot of environmental orgs that are pushing for him to ensure that he does that as soon as he takes office in January. And there's also a push for him to do the same for Line 3 because we've already seen the regulatory process fail us in so many ways here in Minnesota, which is really the last bastion against Line 3. As was said before, all the Canada and North Dakota and Wisconsin have all already approved it and already constructed the segments of Line 3. Minnesota is the last place that is standing against it. And there's still a lot of work to be done here. There's potential for a stay on construction through the Minnesota Court of Appeal that Red Lake and White Earth Nation have filed a week or two ago. And if that goes through, then Line 3 construction will have to be stopped until the legal appeals are finished because, like we said before, like even the Department of Commerce in Minnesota, along with youth groups and indigenous groups and environmental groups, are all appealing this pipeline and have a really good chance of winning those appeals. And so we can get a stay on construction that will delay construction for at least half a year. And then as the legal appeals play out in court, then we can also potentially get another significantly longer delay, especially if Enbridge ends up losing their route permit or certificate of need. And so there's a lot of work still happening at the legal side, at the national side, and on the ground.
And where can people go in order to join that fight?
Absolutely. So as I said before, it can be a bit difficult to do the nonviolent direct action portion given the COVID pandemic. But there also is potential that we will see a second Standing Rock here in Minnesota against Line3. So I would definitely go to southline3.org for more information on the site in general. And then on Facebook, I would follow the Get You Good Scouts as well as Good News Collective and Honor the Earth, and the Line3 Facebook pages. Those all have really great information on what is happening. They provide updates on the fight on the ground. They're all led by indigenous groups who have been in this fight for years now, and they also provide links for donations if they ever need them. And they provide calls to action if you ever need to call the governor, or if they need people to go up north to northern Minnesota and take action or protest. So those are some really great ways to stay up to the fight, as well as find ways to plug in where you can.
Okay, and I will post those links in the chat or in the comments if you're watching it on Facebook, in chat if you're watching it in YouTube. And that's pretty much it. I understand that you were actually part of Standing Rock. Could you tell us a little bit about that and your impression from that?
Absolutely, yeah. I was there with my family when I was in high school for this. We went around Thanksgiving as part of my break to just support the protest. Because I was younger at the time, we didn't participate in any of the actions, but we still participated in the protest. And I very clearly remember standing standing at the edge of some water with a hill at the other side, and armed soldiers basically with assault weaponry standing above us. It was really terrifying seeing how the state was willing to go so far just to ensure that a pipeline gets built. It was really terrifying, but it was also incredibly powerful to see people coming from all around the country, even all around the world, to come together and support indigenous groups and stop this pipeline. I remember seeing a pole that had a wooden pole that had signposts pointing all different directions to places where people had come from, and it really stood out to me of how big this was. And I really think that we do need to continue those kinds of fights where people come together from all around the country, all around the world to fight against this ongoing settler colonialism, ongoing corporate oppression of indigenous people, ongoing violence of the state against indigenous people and protesters. I think we are really going to see a second Standing Rock if we don't stop this through the courts or through the politicians.
And this was the first time that really the community at large has kind of joined the Native American movement in defense. People like Carter, the Bishop Desmond Tutu, the Dalai Lama, unions, and other organizations and politicians joined that condemnation. So this is an ongoing thing. I hope you guys are going to join in and fight this, because a lot is at stake. Well, Sasha, thank you so much for joining us and covering this important topic, and good luck on the ground.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's really important that we get the word out there and that people get plugged in wherever they can.
Okay, so see you later. Bye-bye.